Hey everybody, how you doing? This is a new series for unpacking our shit live. As you can see, our format has changed a little bit due to the responses that we got and the feedback that we got. We wanted to make sure we did something that was a little bit more streamlined, something that was not 85 years long. So we wanted to go ahead, change the format a little bit, shorten things, because we want to get a lot of stuff out to you guys as often as possible. So today we are starting the Family Affairs series. This series discusses how the mental illnesses and psychology of our ancestors has affected us today as a people, what we can do to change that. But before we can figure any of that out, we have to understand where all of that comes from.
Can I chime in real quick?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know if you know, but at the bottom, can you see the bottom of our screens where it has our names?
Mine does not have that. Oh, well, yeah, I see that.
You see what yours says?
It says your name.
Under you, what does yours say? It don't say anything?
It says, I, phony, will see a wee white X. What the fuck is that?
I swear we cannot edit this out. Your response, I don't know what that is. That's what's showing under for your name. And I was going to say that we were going to introduce ourselves, but it has our names on the screen. See how mine says my name? I look at yours, I'm like, it says iPhone I we C E we white X. I'm like, I have no idea what that is. So
Lord have.
And it says, so your name isn't on the doggone.
Hold on, gosh darn it!
Oh my God, that's hilarious though. You said
that. I don't even know how that happened.
Me either.
That is absolutely ridiculous.
Oh man, but it's funny though. Whew. Funny. Let me pause it.
And we are back.
We are back.
And my name is spelled correctly under my box, which is nice. I don't know what the fuck that other shit was, but let us continue. So yes, we are starting the Family Affairs series, and part 1 is unpacking their shit. Their shit meaning our ancestral psychological baggage that we do still carry. Now, this is the part where white people and others like to say, oh, it happened so long ago, it doesn't really matter anymore. But white people have the luxury of saying that because their ancestors didn't experience any of this, nor did they experience any of the effects. So they have the luxury of being able to say dumbass shit like that. And I think it needs to be reiterated of just how stupid that shit sounds when it comes out of their mouths. We're not talking about them today. It's about us. It's about us. So we're gonna have to go all the way back to the beginning. And the beginning, I mean, is when we got here to this here fuckhole. We came here in the most traumatic of situations. We were kidnapped. Now let's take a minute and think about the trauma that happens to a person who is kidnapped. Okay? That is a level of trauma that not a lot of people are able to come back from. But not only were we talking about one person, we're talking about millions of people kidnapped human beings from other countries. Well, Africa.
Right.
So we get here and it's immediate torture. Being treated as an animal or being considered as low as an animal is torture in and of itself. And it sets you up psychologically to change the psychological makeup of who you are. I can only imagine what our ancestors were like before they got here and experienced the trauma that they did. Because their trauma is different from, say, an ancestor who was born a slave. Those are very different experiences. We'll come back to that in part 2 and 3. We're going to revisit that, just how different those experiences are. That's not really taken into account a lot. Because again, we were thought of as animals. So thinking about our mental health, thinking about psychology was neither here nor there. And to be quite honest, they hadn't already figured that shit out for themselves. For themselves, I mean, you know, white people, the people who kidnapped us. So we're not getting any help for this treatment. No one is saving us from this torture. No one. All the shit we learned in Roots about the different type of torture, that ain't shit. There will be things about slavery and the types of torture that our ancestors went through that we may never know, that is more horrid than anything we do know.
I believe that.
It's so deep. There was a saying in slavery times from slaves who had been sold up to places farther north. And when I mean farther north, meaning like Georgia, North Carolina, you know, Tennessee, shit like that. They all knew if you went to Florida, you was not coming back. You wasn't going to get sold out of that. You were going to die. Because in Florida, they were feeding our babies to alligators. We all know the raggedy fuck shit they were doing in Florida. So now you have an entire group of people who are finishing up the experience of being kidnapped, forcing the children that they do have here on this fuckhole land, forcing them to adjust to being tortured, basically. I don't want to hear any of those cutesy stories that they sold us in high school. And I bought it in high school. And then I got older. This whole fuck shit of the friendly slave master, the one that wasn't that bad, but still considered us less than human. We'll come back to that point of being satisfied with just being tolerated.
So this is a part of a 3-part series, right?
Mm-hmm.
This one is, what is this one titled?
This one is titled Unpacking Their Shit.
Unpacking their shit.
Part 2 is the Great Unpacking.
Mm-hmm.
Part 3 is What Now?
So this is unpacking their shit.
Yes, our ancestors, our elders, our parents and grandparents, all of that. Because in order to heal us, we all have to heal. It can't be just this generation here or this generation there. It can't be, you know, just the black women or just black. No, we all have to fucking heal. Okay? The gay community, the black gay community, everybody needs to fucking heal.
Yeah, so it starts somewhere. Yeah, I read that somewhere that once we decide to heal, like we make the choice to heal, we heal
Mm-hmm.
our ancestors and those, you know, before us and those after us, once somebody starts the healing process. So it's starting with us.
Mm-hmm. And it's starting from the beginning, because we were immediately taught how to hide pain. Because if you showed any type of weakness, you could be dead. Because again, you're cattle. You're not a human being. You're an animal. So when you're no longer doing what an animal is supposed to do, or what they expect that animal to do, they're just going to take you out back and off you.
Yeah.
So you cannot show pain. You cannot show weakness. So again, we're being taught to tolerate torture.
Mm-hmm.
That does not stop when slavery stops. Because let me tell you how angry white people were that shit was over. Okay? It kept going because they understood that along with our progression, their power would weaken, their power in whiteness would be weakened, and it would be a level playing field. And how the fuck would they be a level playing field with folks who were thought of as cattle? We're too good for that. So the being treated like cattle never stopped. That mentality never stopped. It never went anywhere. It continued on into the 20s, okay? We move on into the 20s. We are now becoming educated. We are now building our own communities around ourselves, pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps. And that's when you started to see all these towns pop up, you know, the ones we know about, like, you know, Tulsa, Black Wall Street, Rosewood. There's one, Nicodemus, Kansas. There's Mount Bayou, Mississippi. All of these Black towns started popping up because we started to understand, like, listen, they don't want peace with us. They would rather just be rid of us, to exterminate us. So to prevent that from happening, we have to gather in numbers and protect ourselves by the law. So they can't fuck with us, because that's the only thing they preach all the time. Pull yourselves up by your own bootstraps. Do it yourself. Don't expect any handouts. Blah, 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 blah. Okay? So now we're succeeding. We are really succeeding.
Yeah.
We're succeeding so much. We are succeeding past them. And that is where the problem lies. That is where their fear lies. Seeing us do better than them. Now, the only thing they had going for themselves were numbers and guns. And they use all of that shit.
Absolutely.
So now you have to think about, with all of that psychology that was, you know, pressed into us when we got here. Now you have to think about it in terms like this. You've pulled yourselves up by your own bootstraps. You created this entire Black utopia for yourselves, right? And then here they come, bombing that bitch, setting it ablaze, murdering everyone. And say you're a kid in the 1920s and you're looking at this like, we did exactly what you said to do in order to get that American dream. We followed every rule, every law. We did everything you said we were supposed to do. But because we were doing better, because Tulsa was actually in the process of having, or they already had the beginnings of an airport. You understand?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They had their own fucking landing strips. Do you understand this? Burnt that whole shit to the ground. And then drove all the Black people away with numbers and fear.
Yep.
Because
Black
they
Wall
couldn't
Street.
fathom being on a level playing field where people who were thought of as cattle are more successful than the originators, because white people love to think they're the first in any and everything.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
That shit is annoying. And it's a lovely lie they like to tell themselves constantly. That goes with all that manifest destiny bullshit. Like I'm just gonna be, if you think about the term just itself, manifest destiny, you just making up your purpose. Like, okay, well, I say that this is what I'm supposed to do. So boom, that's literally it. That is the audacity that white folks have been riding on since day motherfucking one.
Mm-hmm.
They could not imagine manifest destiny in the hands of Black people. Because they can only think in terms of themselves. They can only think about what they would do if they were treated the way we were. They think, oh, race war. Think about it. That's the first thing they go to is rage and violence and all this shit, when all we want is equality. But again, they can't handle equality. Because maybe they'll find that they're not as qualified as they're saying, or as they actually are.
Yeah, as they think they are.
Yeah. But now, and don't forget, that's been ingrained in you since the very beginning. Since the very beginning. I'm up here. You and yours are down here.
Right.
Everything will be okay if we keep it like this. I mean, it could be like this, maybe like this, but no, yeah, that won't work. And that definitely won't work for us. So right about here, between here and here is your place.
And we have to work extra hard to even get there.
But see, now you have to think
To
about
me.
the psychology of the people at that time when we did that. We did all that shit, and they still burnt it to the ground.
Right.
Now think about the psychology of that whole generation of people. Let's think about the survivors of Tulsa and Rosewood and things like that. I remember reading in interviews with the people, the survivors of Rosewood, it's like fear kept them silent. Because when you see something like that, again, it's just trauma on top of some of that other trauma.
Exactly. That they ain't hear from their people. Their people who went through trauma to,
Right. And then you have to think about the manipulation of it all. We're telling you this, and then we're doing this, and then cover it up with whatever fake intentions that they had.
Yeah.
Think about the different types of personalities that branch off from that. You have the ones that are angry. You have the ones that want to comply. You have the ones that want to be a middle ground. It's either are we equal or are we not, but we are not. And they wanted to be ingrained in our DNA that that's what we were destined to be, is less than. And we were just destined to be less than. Okay? It was nice. We'll have 1 or 2 or 5 niggers come through. That's enough,
Yeah.
But not too many. Too many makes them nervous. Too many makes them nervous. Too many successful terrifies them, so they got to burn shit down to the ground. But again, what's that?
No, I was saying how that's truly unfortunate.
Oh, like I said, you had a question. But yeah, so we're being thought of as cattle. We're going through all these different traumas. No one is saying, hey, are you okay? And any of that. Because we're not good enough for that. You know what I'm saying? And I also think in that era was the beginning of the horror show that is Black people in the history of medicine. It goes into why we don't like to seek medical attention, because we were America's favorite guinea pigs.
Yes.
It's so much deeper than the Tuskegee experiment. So much deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So many torturous things done to us in the name of medical science. I can't think of the doctor's name, and I'm kind of glad I don't know that fucker's name, because he would perform all of these monstrous examinations and techniques on to study gynecology. Mm-hmm. Again, his name escapes me.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about too. They actually had a statue of him up somewhere. Was it?
Is it one of the statues that they ripped down, or is that still up and needing to be ripped down?
Something. I don't know if it's in New York, Virginia. It's somewhere. But yes, he would mislead. Of course, it's always about misleading, right? Mm-hmm. But perform these different routines on women who either just had babies, or it's something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And they were just being in pain, no type of anesthesia, no type of medicine or anything. He did this for years. And yeah, I'm going to find the name and then let you know after this. But I read about that and I was like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you serious?
Monstrous shit.
Yeah.
But again, we're tough. We don't feel pain like that.
Right. Because we're animals. We can take it.
We were bred for that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is the thought process. Now, I remember, the Harlem Renaissance began in the 20s as well. And that's when we started to gain a lot of ground in being intellectuals.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very fascinating, interesting time as well. But it was also fraught with racism. Like racism was the entire backdrop of that whole era. And just being more intellectual about how we approached it, about how we wanted to change it. But again, racism. And the way racism in, 20s and 30s, it was just all the beginnings of that institutionalized racism, built-in racism, to the point where you can't really escape it, so you should just accept it. That's why you always hear, you just, somebody's going to be racist somewhere, you can't do anything about it. That's not true. We can do something about it. Matter of fact, white people can do something about that, but they choose not to.
Right. So they have to take a responsibility. But what do you think that we can do about it?
What we can do? Well, that's going to be in part 3.
Okay.
But in part 1, we did try to escape it by migrating. That's when we start going into the Great Migration. And that in and of itself is a totally different set of traumas. So now you have to think, you have that generation raised by this generation that is unbelievably steeped in a trauma that we could not imagine.
Absolutely.
But they've also been taught to hold that shit in, toughen up, and take it. All of the after effects, all the stuff that we know now about psychology and mental illness and trauma and all of that is still happening. All of that happened to them. They just didn't have a way to express it, a way to talk about it, and they didn't know that they had permission to.
Yeah.
So you have that mindset going into the next generation. That's the generation that I feel the most for. Are their ancestors, the ones that were slaves, the ones that got out of slavery, the ones that tried to make things better for themselves in the 20s, that type of heartbreak that they had to endure over and over and over and over again. And it seemed like there's no relief in sight. We all like to throw around that number 400 years, but I don't think we sat down and understand the implications of what happens in 400 years.
Mm-hmm. And
how that affects everything about us. Because it was our genesis. I know we all like to believe we all came from kings and queens. Trust me. I know we all want to be, yep, my, great so-and-so, they were out in Egypt and they ruled between such and such BC and other such and such BC. And, their tomb is in a pyramid. No. Sometimes you were just a very good-hearted sharecropper. Sometimes you were just a person in the marketplace. Sometimes you were just a farmer. And that is okay. I don't think we should shame the ancestors that were slaves. I don't think we need to shame them. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really disgusting thing to do. It's right up there with dismissing them, dismissing their experience. I understand it's not a pretty thing to talk about. I understand it's not a nice thing to talk about. But once we stop talking about these things, once we stop having them somewhere in our minds, in our, memory bank somewhere, shit is just going to happen again. It's just going to happen again. And I feel like we are at a point where, what are we about to do about it? Because this year was a lot.
A whole lot.
This year was a whole lot.
Yes.
So we're at a really good time to figure out how we want to approach this new millennium. Because it's not even just a new century, it's a new millennium. And I feel like with this new millennium, we as Black people, as far as Black people and anyone else non-Black, we need to get some things straight right here, and right the fuck now about what we're going to do, what we are not going to do, and what we will and will not tolerate. Let's get that straight now.
And so what would you
But in order to do
suggest
that,
then? On that, so like in our last, to get us out of here. So we got 5 minutes. What would you say our responsibility is right now, knowing that in order to heal, we have to think about those that came before us and what they endured.
Mhm.
So coming forward and pushing through 2020, which was a bitch,
Mhm.
what would you say that can lead us into 2021 and also into the next segment? Well, your next segment.
Learn, log off, read. I think we're missing a lot of that. Yes, I think, the internet is great. I think it's a great place to find, information, things like that, obvious, shits. But I also think there is something to be said by just going and sitting down and reading.
What should we read?
What's that?
What should we read?
Miseducation of the Negro. That is my top pick. That is my number one top pick. I also highly suggest any of the Harlem Renaissance writers. My personal favorites, Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston. Although I don't like the way Langston handled Zora, that whole Zora situation. I really don't like that. I feel like, God rest his soul, but I feel like he bitched up in that situation. I really just don't like the way they kind of, shoved her off to the left. I'm sorry, I'm getting into a whole nother thing. But I think it's a good idea to start not just, focusing in on the torture aspect and things like that. I think we need to focus in on the human aspect of our ancestors, because they weren't just cattle, they were human beings. And I think it's a way to honor them, is to learn about them beyond them getting whipped. You know what I'm saying?
So the
Because there is
education of a Negro,
a culture there. There was a love there, because they still developed ways to sustain themselves and to sustain some type of culture through everything. And I think that's one of the best things that evolved out of slavery, is our innate ability to recreate, to create, period, to create something out of nothing, our ingenuity, our intuition, all of that.
right?
All of that was born out of struggle. And the next step is, how do we step out of that struggle and put it back on the shelf instead of using it as a tool of validation? That's what we need to step out of. Understand the struggle, appreciate the struggle, but does it have to be a struggle?
Does it have to be a struggle?
I don't think it does. But that pretty much wraps up.
That's good. That wraps up part 1.
You know me, I got 80 million other things to say, but I'm not about to keep y'all here for 5 hours.
Because you don't want us to be here for 800 years, remember? You were just like, that's why we chose a new format. Because with live, what happens is we get engrossed in commenting and talking to people, interacting. Next thing you know, it's an hour later. We having fun. We just scratched the surface. We got to make ourselves wrap it up. It's like, okay, it's an hour and 30 minutes. Maybe we should wrap it up. But yeah, so this was good. This is the first part in a 3-part family series for your segment. So we're going to be back in, well, we got to see how we're going to do that, because we're doing this every 2 weeks, but yours isn't until the 2 weeks after the 2 weeks. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll figure that out. We'll figure that out.
Regardless, there will be a part 2 coming out soon.
Absolutely.
Right after this one.
So
please stay tuned. We thank you all for going through this journey with us as we go through the beginning process. of this whole experience, this whole thing. I'm very excited about where this can go. I'm very excited about where this can take us. Now, I'm not talking about just us. I'm talking about us,
Us.
all of us.
Us.
So I'm just
Us as a
excited.
people.
Yes, us as a people. I'm excited. I'm very excited.
So thank y'all for watching. Thank y'all for coming in to watch Unpacking Our Shit with KJ Lewis Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Fiat Hollins. See y'all next time.
Bye.